When it comes to unsolved mysteries, there's very little left in the world that can outpace the ocean. When you think of the vastness of this watery world, so many questions come up, and some of them have simply never found answers. But tonight we're going to dive into one that's always caught my attention: the story of the Mary Celeste, a ship that set sail for one purpose and brought back an incredible mystery all its own. I'm Enrique Couto, the host of Weekly Spooky. Let's dive into this story of the Mary Celeste. No less a literary luminary than Sir Arthur Conan Doyle, the creator of Sherlock Holmes, thought the story of a seemingly haunted ship christened the Amazon was worth putting down to paper. In the many years since, that story has been retold in fiction, during the golden age of radio, in television, and in film. That ship, first dubbed the Amazon, was later called the Mary Celeste, a name which has echoed through the years since. For as long as humans have been sailing the high seas, they've collected tales about strange phenomena like mermaids, sirens, sea monsters, magical realms, and haunted ships. Of course, most of these stories come from starved men full of scurvy and rum, so they should probably be taken with a pinch of sea salt. Hey, let's unfold the genuine mystery of the Mary Celeste. It's the year 1860. Abraham Lincoln becomes the President of the United States just a year before the Civil War breaks out, and a modestly sized cargo ship built with locally felled lumber is being constructed in Spencer's Island, Nova Scotia. The original owners dreamed of making it a merchant sailing ship, rich in the transport business. But it didn't take long for it to become a nightmare, one that seemed never-ending. Originally registered under the name the Amazon, her maiden voyage in 1861 from Nova Scotia to London was delayed when, just before departure, the first captain fell ill and died. Then, with a new captain, the Amazon sailed across the Atlantic, but not without misfortune. The Amazon collided with fishing equipment off the coast of Eastport, Maine, and later ran into and sunk another ship in the English Channel. Stories of the seemingly cursed vessel were sparse until October 1867, when the Amazon ran ashore during a storm, being so badly damaged that her owners abandoned her as a wreck. That derelict boat was unwanted and untouched, but was eventually bought and sold a number of times before it was restored and renamed the Mary Celeste. The 4th of December, 1872. In the preceding months, Mount Vesuvius had erupted in Italy, and the first ever FA Cup final had been held in England. Later, a meteorite would strike the earth near a small town called Banbury. But none of this mattered to Captain David Morehouse, commander of the Canadian ship De Gratia. Through his telescope at a vessel on the horizon drifting aimlessly in the North Atlantic Sea. House knew the boat. It was the Mary Celeste, a cargo ship that had left New York 8 days before him, loaded with about 1,700 barrels of denatured alcohol. Denatured alcohol is not a drinkable substance, as it has an alcohol content between 70 and 99%, and is used as a solvent, cleaning agent, disinfectant, and fuel. Those who mistakenly think otherwise find themselves blind or dead. Captain Morehouse spied the ship floating in the open sea. He realized the Mary Celeste should have already arrived in Genoa, Italy, much earlier. The captain thus changed course to investigate. When members of the De Gratia crew boarded the Mary Celeste, they found her deserted, but with no indications of where everyone had gone, or, more importantly, why. There were no signs of fire, violence, or a struggle. The sails were in bad shape, some missing altogether, and the rigging was damaged and hanging out of place. The main hatch still had its cover on, but the covers of the hatches at the front and back of the boat, fore and aft in sailing terms, were off and lying beside the other hatches on the deck. The cargo of industrial alcohol was untouched. About 3.5 feet of water sloshed around the cargo hold, which was a significant amount, but not alarming. Disassembled one of the 2 pumps, but the vessel was still perfectly seaworthy. The other thing of importance missing was the lifeboat, but the crew's belongings were still in their quarters, and there remained enough food and water on board to last another 6 months. Most of the ship's papers were missing, along with the captain's navigational instruments, but in the mate's cabin was the ship's logbook. Its final entry was dated 8 a.m. on November 25th, 10 days earlier. That final logbook entry placed the Mary Celeste within sight of Santa Maria Island in the Azores, a small group of volcanic islands off the coast of Portugal. But by the time Morehouse and his crew discovered her, she had drifted almost 750 kilometers to the east. 10 people were missing from the Mary Celeste, including Captain Benjamin Spooner Briggs, his wife Sarah, and the couple's 2-year-old daughter Sophia, as well as 7 crewmen. Noting, Briggs was a part owner of the boat and an extremely experienced skipper. He had handpicked his crew, and they were all regarded as first-class sailors. A seasoned team and not the type to abandon ship without a serious reason. So, what was that reason? Why and how did 10 people disappear from the Mary Celeste without a trace? These questions would soon fill newspapers and books across the globe. They appeared in the law courts of Gibraltar. After finding the Mary Celeste, Captain Morehouse decided to sail her himself to Gibraltar, about 1,100 kilometers away, so he could claim salvage. The Code of Salvage is an ancient part of international maritime law that states that anyone who helps rescue or recover a ship or cargo is owed a reward proportional to its value by the ship's owners. In this case, Morehouse and the crew of the De Gratia had rescued the Mary Celeste and sailed her back to safety at their own risk. When the ship arrived in Gibraltar, she was confiscated by the authorities until the salvage hearings could be resolved in court. As part of those court proceedings, it was suggested the disappearance of Captain Briggs and his family and crew were because of foul play. Marks were found on the bow of the ship that some claimed were made by an axe, and there were also dark stains found both on the boat and on the captain's sword that might have been blood. The Attorney General in Gibraltar believed the crew got drunk one night on the alcohol in the ship's hold, even though it was undrinkable, and slaughtered Captain Briggs and his family in a drunken frenzy before escaping in the lifeboat. Soon, the results of scientific tests proved nothing untoward had happened aboard the Mary Celeste, and, after 3 months, the authorities released the ship from custody. Morehouse and his crew received less than $8,000 for their salvage efforts, which was well below the expected payment given the value of the ship and cargo. Unfortunately for Captain Morehouse, the court case had generated rumors he and his men had killed the occupants of the Mary Celeste so that they could claim the ship for salvage. That accusation wasn't ever proven, but the doubt never quite faded away, and by awarding such a small salvage settlement, it seemed the court remained suspicious. Thus, the curse of the Mary Celeste continued. Other theories of foul play have claimed that Briggs and Morehouse were friends, conspiring to claim the insurance money for the ship and staging a disappearance. Another, admittedly somewhat ridiculous view was that Captain Briggs, who was a devout Christian, had lost his mind in a religious frenzy and murdered everyone on board before killing himself. In the decades that followed, the story of the Mary Celeste was retold and built upon many times over. In 1883, the Los Angeles Times published a fictional narrative in which the ship was found in perfect condition and fully rigged. The cooking fire was burning in the galley stove, dinner on the table, barely cold. The book updated to the hour before the ship was found. Next year, Arthur Conan Doyle's story on the Mary Celeste was published, and even though it was as fictional as the reportedly true LA Times story, much of it became accepted as fact. These kinds of fictions have made it even harder to come up with plausible explanations for what happened aboard Captain Briggs' ship, but a few proposals have gained popularity over the years. Let's get the first and most outrageous one out of the way. Briggs and his family and his crew were whisked away by aliens. Since aliens are apparently responsible for building the pyramids, making crop circles, and of course assassinating JFK, one supposes we should at least consider the possibility that aliens swooped down on a random seafaring ship and kidnapped all of those aboard. Another guess is that the Mary Celeste was hit by a waterspout, the oceanic equivalent of a tornado, which would explain all the water in the ship's hold. A waterspout would also have caused the atmospheric temperature to drop, which could have driven water from the bilges into the pumps. This might have convinced the crew the vessel had taken on more water than she had, and was therefore in danger of sinking. Under those circumstances, Briggs might have chosen to abandon ship while he was in sight of land. On the theme of natural disasters, other commentators have theorized that an earthquake on the seabed, known as a seaquake, may have generated enough turbulence aboard the Mary Celeste to cause the spillage of alcohol and the release of ethanol fumes. That would potentially explain the hatches, which might have been opened in an attempt to air out the cargo hold. It would also tie in with the 9 empty barrels that were found on board. If there had been a buildup of fumes, Briggs would have been concerned, and that concern might have been elevated by rumblings from the cargo hold, the smell of fumes, and perhaps even an explosion. In that case, Briggs and his crew might have climbed into the lifeboat, attached it to the ship, and allowed themselves to float behind at a distance. Seems like a reasonable enough response to the situation, but one has to question the sense in tying yourself to something you think might explode, especially since a lifeboat in the open ocean is far from a safe place to be. Experts suggest the Mary Celeste would have been a safer bet than the lifeboat, even if she had suffered an explosion, and that Briggs would have been a fool to abandon ship. But the alcohol explosion theory had a lot of support at the time, and gained some credibility from later reports of ships whose cargo had exploded under similar conditions. It was also noted the 9 empty barrels were made of red oak. Other barrels which were made of white oak. Red oak is more porous than white oak. Possible some of the alcohol may have seeped out of the barrels, filling the cargo hold, or toxic fumes. The main argument against the idea that the Mary Celeste's crew were trying to escape an explosion was that no scorch marks or evidence of an explosion were ever found. In 2006, an experiment carried out by Dr. Andrea Sella of the University College London showed that such an outcome was perfectly possible. Sella built a replica of the Mary Celeste's hold with paper cubes to represent barrels, and then used butane to generate the type of explosion that would have happened had alcohol fumes in the hold ignited. The results showed a massive explosion with no burning, no scorching, and no soot left behind. According to Sella, The trapped gas created a pressure wave type of explosion with a spectacular surge of flame, followed by relatively cool air. Eruption would have been enough to blow open the hatches. An alcohol-fueled explosion and a desperate evacuation is the most logical and scientifically sound explanation of what happened to those aboard the Mary Celeste. But forensic researcher Anne McGregor thinks there's more to the story. After cross-referencing notes from the salvage trial with the ship's log and oceanic data from the time, McGregor concluded Briggs' instruments were probably damaged because his measurements appeared to be wrong. It was actually 120 nautical miles west of where he thought he was. It seems the ship had experienced bad weather the night before the final logbook recording, and with the pumps broken, perhaps due to coal dust buildup from a previous cargo, had no way to measure how much water had been taken on in the rough seas. If Briggs suspected there was too much water on board, he had a decision to make. If he pressed on, he knew they wouldn't see land for hundreds of miles. So if there was a possibility the ship was sinking, their best chance would be to head for Santa Maria Island, which by his faulty calculations was nearby, while they still could. Not have been the best decision, but it wouldn't have been crazy. One issue with many of these theories is that Captain Briggs not only abandoned his ship, he also abandoned his logbook. If he really did think the ship was slowly sinking, he would have still had plenty of time to collect the log, or at least to scribble a quick note as to his plans. Ships' captains in the 19th century were not in the business of forgetting to make crucial entries in their logbooks, no matter the circumstances. Of course, we'll never know for sure what happened to those on board the Mary Celeste, but we do know the ship's bad run continued long after the mysterious disappearance of her crew. Trial in Gibraltar was concluded. She sailed to Italy as originally planned to deliver her cargo before heading to New York. But by the time the Mary Celeste arrived in New York, the rumors of bloodshed, murder, mutiny, and inexplicable disappearances had circulated throughout the shipping world, and nobody wanted anything to do with the seemingly cursed ship. Eventually, the owners were forced to sell her at a considerable loss. The new owners didn't fare much better, consistently losing money, and in 1879, the Mary Celeste called into St. Helena Bay to seek medical help when yet another captain fell sick. He died on the island shortly after in a sequence of events eerily similar to the way in which the ship's first captain had died. All told, the Mary Celeste had seen 3 captains die prematurely, fueling speculations the ship was cursed. 6 years later, luck still hadn't improved, and the desperate skipper, Captain Parker, conspired with a group of shippers in a crooked plot to finally make some cash on what had been truly a terrible investment. Filled the Mary Celeste with worthless cargo, which they insured for $30,000, or $850,000 by today's standards, before deliberately running the vessel aground near Haiti, wrecking her forever. Investigations by the insurance company revealed the attempted trickery, and Captain Parker and his accomplices were soon facing trial in Boston for conspiracy to commit insurance fraud. Parker was also charged with willfully casting away a ship, known as baratry, that used to be punishable by death. Luckily for the captain, he avoided the death penalty, and the jury was split on the crime of fraud, so Parker went free. But his reputation was ruined. He died in poverty just 3 months later. To continue to add to the doomed legacy, one of his fellow defendants went mad, and another killed himself. Even under normal circumstances, this would be an almost unbelievable chain of events. But looking back, it seemed very little was normal about the Mary Celeste, or those who came in contact with her. It's for the best that the Mary Celeste now lies in a permanent, watery grave at the bottom of the ocean.